Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Morning friends, I am Jay Kumar, faculty in Environmental Science at Geetham University. I am here to discuss on environmental studies, which is an ability enhancement compulsory course offered by UGC. Coming to the contents of the course, in today's discussion, we are going to cover on topics such as what is environment, its meaning, definition, why we need to study this, what are the components of the environment, what makes the environment as a multidisciplinary subject, and how the scope and importance have to be understood, and finally, sustainability. Its concept, that is the concept of sustainability, how to achieve a sustainable development. That is the main idea, or what are the contents we are going to discuss. Well, environment. Environment literally means, if you just look into a dictionary, environment means surrounding. The word environment takes its origin from French and spelled as environneur, and it means the surrounding. Surrounding means what? What do you mean by the surrounding? So the objects, the space, living and non-living components around you constitute the environment. For example, you are sitting in your room. The surrounding space and the objects constitute the environment. Well, it means a condition which is implied on the surrounding. Our earth is our environment, and we are living in this earth, and our life is sustained through very many biotic and abiotic components. For example, we breathe. We breathe air from the surrounding. Our air is purified by the plants. We depend on the plants for food, and they grow in a soil. So there is literally an interaction between the air from the plants, and the plants interact with the soil for their food, and we depend on the plants for the food. So it is a totally an interlinked phenomenon. So in our surrounding, we depend on both biotic as well as abiotic components, and their interdependence makes us more interested to learn what is this environment. Continuing to understand the definition of the environment given by the Environmental Protection Act of Government of India, it says as the total of air, water, land, and their interrelationship with human beings and other lives. That is what being given. So how to infer from this statement? Well, we know about rain formation. Let us take an example of the rainwater cycle. Water from the surface of the earth is generally evaporated, and the water clings on the small nuclei particles of the atmosphere, and they form clouds. These clouds start moving due to the pressure variations. Finally, the water from the clouds precipitates back to the earth as rain. In this process, when the water has to become the vapor, it requires heat, and that heat is being supplied by the sun, very particularly through the solar radiation. The atmospheric pressure plays a major role that helps in the congregation of the clouds and makes the rain fall back to the earth. The rain falls on the land, improves the water content, rather the moisture content of the soil, makes the nutrients available to the plants, and they grow. So there is a total relationship of air, water, and land in the atmosphere, as well as in the water, as well as in the land. There is a complete relationship. And another thing is, we find an interrelationship. When water gets evaporated, it forms clouds. in air and comes back to land and nourishes the life. So we are now dependent on the plants and the nutrients. And once we die, we again become a part of the soil and return the nutrients back to the soil. So there is a relationship between the living as well as the non-living components, that is the water, air, and land. This relationship is so intricate, fine, and this interrelationship has to be understood. That makes the environment understanding. So in nutshell, what we find is environment means surrounding, which includes the biotic components as well as the abiotic components and their interrelationship. That is what we infer from the definition given by the Environmental Protection Act. Now the question comes to our mind, why we need to study. Uh, why we need to study the environment? First, the environmental resources are finite. Finite means what? It is limited in quantity. So using the earth's resources in a rational manner, rational means in a justifiable manner, is a must. So automatically we have to think of the three important terms: equitable, ethical, and sustainable use of the earth resources. So it is a very much need of the hour. Equitable means sharing of the resources, equally or uniformly sharing the resources across the globe. We know at some parts of the world, rather at some regions of the world, we find the sources to be abundant, while at some places or some regions, we found them to be scanty, very less. Hence, if the resources are distributed in a uniform manner, then rather we can say again use the term in a rational manner, then the life becomes easier and sustainable development is possible. Second, in a ethical manner, in the sense, a moral and a sensible way of utilizing the resources. For example, not wasting the water, not wasting the water running through the tap, closure of tap after washing your hands. It is an ethical way. It is an ethical and a responsible way to use our Earth's resources. Finally, we use a term called sustainable. Sustainable means how we are going to use the earth resources in an effective manner. For example, you could find the symbol in the slide: reduce, reuse, and recycle, indicating that the sources have to be reduced. For example, you can reduce the utilization of water, reduce the wastage, and reuse the used water, very particularly the kitchen water, could be used for gardening. And you can drain the water to the kitchen garden and small vegetables or greens could be grown in that area. Third thing, and if you treat the water appropriately and finally recycle back further and further, thereby you can have a sustainable development. So the first need to study is how we can use the earth's resources, which are finite in nature, in an equitable, ethical, and in a sustainable manner. Now, the next need comes, why we have to study. You have to understand how the human behavior affect the environment. Well, a stunning statistical report, which has been given recently by the Ministry of Environment and Forests, says that every year we are losing 1% of the forest cover, not only globally, but also at the nation. So we know that we are actually trying to reach to a process of desertification. We know forest resources are fantastic and it is the base for our civilization and for the total structural environment. In a forest, you find trees. The trees are used for very many purposes. For example, wood from the forests are used for house construction, paper industry, industrial activities, and for very many purposes. So cutting of trees from the forest, we generally call it as logging. And as a result, you find a large scale clearing of forests called deforestation has happened in the last decades, last 4 decades, and that is being found to be the base cause for all sort of pollution, global warming, uneven distribution of rainfall. We can say it's a failure of monsoon, warming up of the globe. So now how to change our human behavior? That is the biggest question. So you find uh, cutting of trees, which is not a correct behavior. And on the other hand, we go for an afforestation, planting of trees, whatever the possible occasions. Instead of cutting a cake during your birthday, or rather, in addition to cut a cake in a birthday, why can't you plant a tree? That is the question. So, thereby, we can improve the greenery. So, respecting the forests and having a complete change of a mindset towards eco conservation is very much required today, and we should know how to understand the environment, how our own behavior is affecting or changing the environment. So that is a point to be noted. In continuation of our understanding on why we need to study this course on environmental studies, is the important point that we are going to discuss now is to understand the scientific principles that govern interactions between the living and non-living. We all depend on the plants for our food. I have just kept a picture of a plant. Well, how plants synthesize their own food? We all know, we have studied in our basic classes, it is by a process called photosynthesis. The plants, through their roots, take up water and minerals from the soil, and it is transported through a shoot system. They do have leaves which are green in color, and the green color is contributed to a pigment called chlorophyll. When the solar radiations fall on this green color pigment chlorophyll, they get activated, they take up the carbon dioxide and synthesize the starch, which is a carbohydrate, which is stored in the form of a fruit or a shoot or whatever it might be, vegetables or whatever it might be. And in the end, it releases the pure oxygen. So this oxygen purifies the environment and suffices our purpose of taking oxygen. We never strain, we just simply consume the fruits and vegetables. We are totally dependent on the plants for our food. So what a beautiful scientific process happens, and the ultimate benefit is derived by humans. Not only humans, but also by other animals. Now, it is our responsibility to conserve plants and soil and water. Unless the scientific principle is understood and explained, the beauty of interaction in the ecological aspect or the ecological environment is not understood. So, this gives us a drive and gives us a need to study this environmental science. We have an understanding that why we need to study environment. Now we can look on to the major components of the environment. The environment is composed of three major components: atmosphere, hydrosphere, lithosphere, which have an influential role on the life bonded sphere called biosphere. Now just we will discuss one by one. The first component, atmosphere. What is atmosphere? If you ask, we just literally raise our head above and look up at the sky. And the looking up at the sky is for very many social beliefs, and we believe that atmosphere is that particular region found in the sky. Now, technically, what is this atmosphere? If you just look onto the picture, it is an envelope of gases surrounding the Earth. When you say envelope of gases or a protective layer of gases, immediately we remember one thing from the atmosphere, that is the ozone layer. The ozone layer acts as a protective shield against the harmful ultraviolet radiation coming from the space. If those ultraviolet radiations are not being filtered, it lead into cancer. And since we are saying it is an envelope of gases, the immediate attention comes to us, what is it composed of? So Nitrogen and oxygen forms the major gases in the atmosphere, while carbon dioxide, argon and other gases forms the minor constitution in the atmosphere. So the atmospheric sciences have revealed a research. The research has been revealing that it is made up of small compartments or spheres, and they are troposphere, stratosphere, mesosphere, thermosphere, and exosphere. So they are differently distanced from the Earth's surface. The troposphere is approximately 6 to 20 kilometer distance from the Earth's surface, and where you find the aircrafts, particularly aeroplanes, flying. The next layer is the stratosphere, which is around 50 kilometers, where you find a major region called ozone, which again filters the ultraviolet radiations and it prevents the radiations, thereby we getting susceptible or we are getting victimized to skin cancer is prevented. One thing. Second, it also kills the plants. In the sense, it also disturbs the plant growth. So that is also being prevented by the ozone layer. In fact, we will be having a detailed discussion about the ozone layer in the subsequent classes. Next comes the mesosphere, thermosphere, and exosphere. The maximum distance is the distance that is being approximated to be 10,000 kilometers. And in the thermosphere region, which is above the mesosphere, you find the satellites or the shuttles flying, which are being launched from the Earth as a part of weather monitoring. We are just closely observing the atmosphere as well as our Earth. What are the other planets in the galaxy? That is one type of research. Second thing, we are trying to look onto the weather data. Whether the weather data is conducive, when we will be getting rain, whether any symptoms of cyclone, all these things are being noted here. So, in nutshell, the atmosphere immediately we remember is an ozone. Of course, huge amount of data is available on ozone depletion, and the recent research reports say that because of the recent pandemic lockdown, the ozone layer is rejuvenating and the ozone hole is getting closed. In fact, that is a very good positive note about the atmosphere. And if you just look on an overall perspective, oxygen and nitrogen are the essential gases for the sustenance of life. So we will move to the next component, hydrosphere. Well, moving to the next component, hydrosphere. What do you mean by hydrosphere? Hydro means water, and the only watery planet that is the usable water is Earth. Two-thirds of the Earth is covered by water, and our life is sustained in this Earth only because of water. Our life originated from water, and water is called as elixir of life, that is amurtam of life. Hydrosphere means water resources which are present in the earth, let it be surface or the subsurface. But to have a better understanding, we categorize the water resources into freshwater and marine based on their salt content. The ocean water or the sea water occupies 97.5% of the total water resources, while the freshwater accounts to 2.5%. In the 2.5% of the freshwater, 69% is locked in ice caps and glaciers, 31% is locked in the or sealed beneath the surface as underground water, and the free flowing water or the stagnating freshwater in the forms of lakes is about 0.3%. So this 0.3%, imagine our life is totally dependent on the 0.3% of the water that is available on this earth. All our activities, right from drinking, domestic, or in the form of agriculture, is being carried out in this 0.3% of fresh water. Well, if you just look at water, water is the best indicator of our life. Our body is composed of 85% of water, and if you just take a cell of our body, it is composed of 85 to 86% of water. If 2% decline is observed in the water content, then it leads to a condition called thirst. So ultimately, it is very clear this is a very important life sustaining component where the life originated from the water. All the life originated from the water. So this is a very important sphere and forms the major component of the environment, which also plays a major role in the distribution of the life and its adaptation to the environment. Well, moving to the next component of the environment, that is the lithosphere. Lithosphere literally means or simply means the land on the earth's surface. For our easy understanding, we can call simply as the land. That is the solid portion of the earth. If you just look at the picture, we anchor our life in this land, and it is composed of continental and oceanic crust and the various layers of the earth which are interior. They include your core, mantle, and crust. So the first layer comes as the crust. The crust is differentiated, is the uppermost part of the earth, and it extends up to 100 kilometer from the surface of the earth. And in this layer, in the crust layer, the plants are rooted, and plants are the main components which supply food for us. And moreover, mineral resources are present in the top layer, which are very much essential for our regular industrial and other activities. For example, iron. Iron is a basic metal which is applied in our day-to-day activities. Our gates, for example, our house gates are made up of steel and iron. Our house construction is included with cement and iron. So all our basic physical infrastructure is originating only on the lithosphere and the components present in the lithosphere. Now, if you just look at its anatomy, a cross section of the earth, you could find three main zones. One is crust, second is mantle, third is core. The crust ranges from the top somewhere about 0 to 100 kilometer from the surface of the earth to the deep. To an extent, we can even have a bore well. The next layer is the mantle. The mantle is further divided into, you can see the picture, the upper mantle and the lower mantle. Discussing on the anatomy of the lithosphere, we have been discussing about it is composed of three main zones: crust, mantle, and core. The crust is found to range from 0 to 100 km from the surface of the earth. The mantle is further divided into upper mantle and mantle main area, which starts from 100 to 2900 km, and the outer core, the core is divided into outer and inner core. The outer core extends up to 5100 km from the surface of the earth, and the inner core distances to 6380 kilometers. Look at the mass of the earth and how it is well established. See, all these components are a part of the tectonic plates. If the tectonic plates are under pressure, under natural or man-made pressure, it slightly shifts and creates a condition called earthquake. And it also creates a condition called landslide in hilly regions, where the soil gets loosened, rocks gets rolled on, and creates a disaster. Of course, this has got a good scope in subsequent slides or in the subsequent discussion on the disaster management. So that's what the component of these, it's a very important component, particularly the lithosphere, which has got an influential role in the distribution of the life around the planet or the planet's Earth's surface. So the life is anchored, and that forms the major factor for this lithosphere. Continuing our understanding on the various components of the environment, now we just look on to an important sphere, biosphere. Biosphere, the term clearly states that it is the life in the earth. It includes a single-celled microorganism, for example, bacteria, fungi, or virus, to plants, animals, and a highly organized social living being called humans. The sphere is entwined, it is interlinked with all the other spheres. In fact, the sustenance of the biosphere is supported by the other three spheres, that is, your atmosphere, hydrosphere, and lithosphere. In fact, the distribution of the biota, that is the life around the earth, or rather on the surface of the earth, is governed by the other spheres. For example, let us take whales. Whales, where are they found? They are found in water, that too particularly in marine water. They are not found in freshwater lakes or rivers. So their biological adaptation to live is confined to the marine environment. On the other hand, you take an example of a camel. Camel could able to survive in a desert where there is a scorching sun, and it has got its own natural biological adaptations such as the membranes to close its nostrils, eyes, and long legs to walk in the sinking sandy terrain. All accounts for the distribution of the life and its modifications to the environment. So these are some of an interesting features observed in the biosphere, which is based on the modifications to the other spheres. Humans do have natural adaptations, but their adaptations are only confined to live in the surface of the earth. So that is a point to be noted. Further, plants which also grow on the earth do have some modifications, and they survive to live on the earth, very particularly in the lithosphere. So based on the availability of the nutrients and water, the distribution of the plants, animals, and humans are confined in the biosphere. Thus, we can clearly say that biosphere means life. So, in this life, it is regulated and it is entwined with the other spheres. Those spheres have an influential role, and there exhibits a fantastic relationship between the three major spheres with the biosphere. Now we will move on to the next component, multidisciplinary nature of the environment. Now we have seen the importance, or rather the need to study the environmental science. How this environmental science is multidisciplinary in nature. That has to be understood. Multidisciplinary nature of the environment is a very complex phenomenon, and it is also quite an interesting phenomenon where very many subjects are entwined, interlinked, and makes the environment moving. Well, we can understand through an example which can make our understanding better. Well, we take a cup of water. Where do the water come from? If I ask a question, we just simply crack it as a joke. My mom gave me a bottle of water and I poured it into the cup. There comes the water in the cup. This is what the general joke or a simple answer or a funny answer we give on. But if we examine it deeply, where the water was collected from a can which contained the desalined or a reverse, reverse osmosis reverse osmosis system water, which gave the filtered water, or the water supplied from the local municipality or corporation, which is stored in some and pumped through a motor to a overhead tank, and it is distributed through a network of pipes. We keep on a series of discussion. Now the RO system functions, UV or ozonized, and finally you get a potable drinking water. See, if the water has to come into your cup, engineering aspects are added. A motor is pumping, so it means that the motor requires an electrical connection to run and pump the water from the sump to the overhead container. And finally, it is distributed in a network of pipes. So the water flows in the pipe through gravity. In the RO, whatever the reverse osmosis system, a chemical treatment phenomenon is happening, and the bacterial filters are added to remove the pathogens, and comes a branch of physics, a branch of chemistry, and we know the harmfulness of the bacteria. There comes a branch of biology. So the total science and engineering are involved. Accidentally, or if the water is not properly treated, if you take a contaminated water, you'll be subjected to waterborne contamination, or you may pick up health ailment. To treat the health ailment, you may visit a doctor who may give you or prescribe you a medicine. Subsequently, you visit a pharmacy and consume a list of pills that is being prescribed. So now comes science, engineering, medicine, pharmacy. So all these subjects are interlinked, and that makes the environmental studies as a multidisciplinary in its nature. Well, if the water has to be supplied through the corporation, first it has to be collected from a river, it has to be chlorinated and treated, and it has to be supplied to every individual of the locality. So it requires a lot of social science and administration phenomena. At last, we are also charged for the water that is being supplied to us. So the economics also play a major role. Now you find a variety of disciplines interlinked and entwined. And the question again comes back to us, where do we get the water? If you say, then finally we come to a point that we get the water from rain. So rain is actually a natural phenomenon. Again, it is intertwined with air, water, and surface. And there, as usual, the rain cycle functions. Water is heated, evaporated, goes as clouds. Finally, it precipitates as rain, and it nourishes the biosphere where the plants take up the water, minerals through the roots, photosynthesis process happens. So ultimately, an interlink of biotic and abiotic components, very many science branches, disciplines are entwined, interlinked, and ultimately that forms the multidisciplinary nature of the environment. And the relationship, whatever you find, is so intricate. So the question again come to it. If it is so abundantly multidisciplinary in nature, how to understand its scope and the importance, and finally, how we can apply for our sustainable development? That is the important question. So now let us move towards the scope and importance of the environment, thereby how we can apply it effectively. So the first scope, before that, when we say scope, what do you understand from that? What can we do? It means that what can we do further with the existing environment? So what is the possibility of using it? And if you have the possibility of using it, how effectively you can use it? Unless otherwise the scope and importance are not understood, we cannot use any of the resource or any of the natural resource efficiently, or we don't know how to conserve them. Well, we have an idea of all the natural resources. You have seen the picture in the slide as the wind energy. There is a small windmill being kept there. What is wind? Wind is an abiotic component. How is wind formed? Well, wind is the movement of air. So our earth is revolving. The earth's surface is heated by the sun. So the land and the water is there. Land gets heated faster and gets cooler, while water takes its own time to heat. So the differences in the temperature between air and land, along with the movement of the earth, results in the movement of hot air and cold air, which results in wind. So can we harness this wind and tap the energy potential bind to it? This wind could be harnessed to generate energy, and we call it as wind energy. Obviously, it is a clean and green technology of generating energy. Similarly, today we are using solar panels, which trap the solar radiations, its heat, and it is very well applied in solar heaters, cookers, lights, solar lights, watches, calculators, and many more. So we are using these natural resources in an efficient manner. The next component comes how to conserve these natural resources. If you want to conserve the natural resources, for example, water is a natural resource. We can construct a dam across the river and we can store this water. During monsoon or post monsoon, the river gets its full capacity and the excess amount of water gets drained in the ocean. If it is getting drained in the ocean, the amount of water, the volume of water getting wasted to the ocean is high. So, to avoid the wastage, we developed a concept of constructing a dam. And the excess amount of water goes to the sea and it remains unutilized, and finally we can store it in dam. If we could able to capture them or store them in a large reservoir, how it will be useful? It will be useful in generating hydroelectric energy. Further, the dam could also be used for irrigation. During the lean period, the water from the stored environment could be released to the local agricultural fields and it can help in irrigation. Not only for irrigation, it can be used for drinking water for the local urban as well as the rural public. Even the dam could be used for some aesthetic sensing, and also fisheries also do have a good chance in cultivating fishes, growing them, harboring them, harvesting them, and they can be sold to the public. So thereby the economy of the fishermen can also be improved. So this drinking water source which helps in the better establishment of the urban and the rural environments. So this way we can manage to conserve the water resource. Of course, there are disadvantages and advantages in conserving or rather constructing a dam to conserve water or store water. However, by and large, dams serve the purpose of irrigation and drinking. Well, the next scope or importance is to understand the ecological aspects. So, one of the most important aspect is the ecological aspect. Well, the picture shows that a honeybee is sitting in the flower. So now we understand that a honeybee is sitting and it has opened the possibility of not only collecting the nectar, that is the honey from the flower, but also opens the possibility of pollination. The pollen grains of the flower will get adhered on the hairy nature of the body of the honeybee, and when it moves to the next flower, in the event of taking the nectar, the pollen grains have a chances of getting mingled with the next flower and it can effect to a insect pollination and it can start a cross pollination process. So, what a wonderful phenomenon observed in nature. So, we cannot do a cross pollination. Of course, we are doing it in biotechnology at a micro level, but naturally, honeybees doesn't get anything. They just go for their survival, take the nectar, and they store the nectar in the hive. Finally, we get a pure honey from the bee, which has got lot of medicinal properties, and consumption of honey in our day-to-day activity improves and boosts up even our immune system. So the hypothetical research, now coming to the point, this ecological aspect is a very fantastic aspect. One of the hypothetical research says that if honeybees disappear, if there are no honeybees, if the honeybees extinct in the environment, there will be no growth of plants in the planet because pollination in most of the rice plants or sugarcane or any of the flowers happens only due to honeybees. If honeybees are removed, the earth will become a desert. That is what the research finding says. So, this ecological aspect, when we look onto it, it has got fantastic insights. A simple honeybee helps the plants and humans, and the relationship is so intricate. This gives us a scope for further examining the importance of the environmental studies. Next scope we are trying to address is to know the behavior of an organism under natural conditions. Well, in the picture, you find the farmer's friends. Well, exactly the earthworms. Earthworms are detrivorous worms, detrivorous organisms. Detrivorous means they are feeding on the decomposable matter or decomposing matter. So they continuously feed and till the soil, aerate the soil, and convert the fine organic content into fertilizer. Their casts contain readily available nutrients which is readily absorbed by the plants in the soil. So that is a very important aspect. And whatever the waste that is being dumped, they are being converted into a fertilizer by these earthworms. These days, using the earthworms to convert the waste or the garbage, kitchen waste, which is popularly called as vermicomposting, where they are converting the kitchen waste or the garbage to a nutritious vermicast, and if it is applied to the plants, they exhibit a fantastic growth. Even today, these earthworms are employed to remediate any contaminated soil. So, what a fantastic behavior! We give waste and filth to these organisms. They use these filth and they have got a poor neural structure, comparatively very less than humans. They could be in a position to convert the waste or a filthy matter into a fine organic material in the form of cast. They release their excreta in the form of cast, which is nutritious and contains all the major elements and the micro elements essential for the plant growth. So we have to appreciate these annelids, their importance, and unless we know the behavior of this organism under natural conditions, the scope and importance are not understood. So this is an important scope or a scope and an importance where we apply. Scope is we can use these organisms even to clean a contaminated site. Their importance is they are the farmer's friends, they are used in the agricultural field, convert the organic matter into simpler, readily available nutrients to the plants.